On the 16th of March 2003, I was born. I know what you're thinking, and you'd be correct. I was the cutest baby. I could sit here for the next however many minutes and tell you all about the village that I grew up in. I could tell you about my time in musical theatre and how much I adored it. And I could even tell you about when I joined the Brownies as a little girl. That story's been told a million times before. Yeah, I was born in 2003, but I believe my life really began in 2020. And it all started with losing my dad. In 2019, my dad, Richard, was diagnosed with a brain tumour. That year was one of the hardest years of my life, and I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone. People tend to forget that cancer doesn't just affect the patient, it affects people left behind too. Growing up, I was always a daddy's girl. We just had this bond my entire life that seemed completely unbreakable. We had the same humour and adored each other more than anyone could ever imagine. So, you can imagine the surprise on people's faces when I tell them that ever since the 17th of March 2020, the day he died, I've been living my life better than I ever had before. The grief I felt after he died was one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. Sure, the heartbreak was beyond painful, but it taught me a lot about myself. I knew I needed to fill the pain with something new. I couldn't be sad for the rest of my life. I fell in love with reading again. Immersing myself in fictional worlds with a variety of characters and stories made me feel at home. I even took my books with me whenever I went to walk my dog, Pepper. The outdoors meant I had peace, fresh air, a new state of mind. One of the main people who got me through my grief was my best friend Megan. She always checked up on me, never being more than a phone call away. Her family always treated me as one of their own, both before and after I lost my father. They made me realise that I wasn't in fact alone, no matter how isolated I felt. A year later, Megan still lets me rant about my dad whenever I want to. This had a huge impact on my mental health. Not to get corny, but she is one of the most important and influential people in my life. Megan encouraged me to keep going and never failed to make me smile, especially when we'd sit in her car at 10 p.m. at night, screaming any song we could from the radio. The impact my friends and family have had on me is huge. I always thrive when I'm around other people, no matter if it's at a crowded party or just the two of us hanging out. The people I've met, regardless of it being on a cruise, through school, or even online, make me a better person. My family, especially my brothers, have shown me that every moment in life is precious. They always seem to live in the moment, and I'm completely inspired by that. The thought of moving so far away scares me, but I look forward to all of the people I'll meet and the experiences I'll have whilst I'm at university. Another thing that I'm very appreciative of is all of the concerts that I've been to. It sounds ridiculous, but knowing that everyone attending is there for the same reason and the thrill of seeing people perform live is one of my favourite feelings to experience. I don't think anything could match up to it. My first concert was in 2015. I went to see my favourite band, Cimarelli, and it was a complete surprise. Ever since then, I've seen various bands, and I've enjoyed every single concert that I've been to. For college, I wrote an essay all about the representation of disability within film and television. One of the examples I used was Ben Mitchell in EastEnders. The character is portrayed by Max Bowden, who is not a deaf actor. At first, I hated this. I had half a mind to write an essay all about how much I despised the use of a non-deaf actor. Eventually, I gave him a chance, and Ben Mitchell quickly became one of the characters that I relate to the most. This leads me on to the next part of this documentary. I'd now like to discuss the representation of deaf people within the media and how it helped me come to terms with my own identity. The first thing I thought I'd do is show you a clip of both Ben Mitchell from EastEnders and Frankie from EastEnders. I relate to both of these characters a lot, and seeing myself represented on a TV show like EastEnders is massive, and it's helped me come to terms with my own deafness, even causing me to use my Instagram as a platform to raise awareness.
I'm going to need a cochlear implant. His hearing loss is at...
You don't listen to it. You don't listen to it. Is this about your fit boyfriend? Because if you don't want him, suck him morally.
You're all talking about me like I've got no idea what you're saying.
So the clips that you've just watched are the ones that I believe portray deaf people in the best way possible. So now to talk about my own deafness. Mine is completely genetic. I'm about 55 to 60% deaf. Currently I'm trying to learn British Sign Language. It's taking a while, but I'm slowly getting there. Then, obviously, I have my hearing aids. Most people ask what wearing these is like, and I always say it's like everyone has a microphone, and it just really helps me hear words clearer. I can also adjust the volume, which means I can decide whether I want to hear the background noise or whether I want to focus on one person. They're really, really helpful, and I've started wearing them a lot more recently because of the influence that the characters on EastEnders have had on me. So, if I'm going to make a documentary on me, I need to include the most important part of my life. It's a huge part of who I am, and it's something I used to be ashamed of, but I'm kind of just getting used to it now. I have a progressive disease called dystonia. Mine are specified in dystonic tremors. Some of you may just find this interesting, and some of you may relate to it, so I thought I'd take a moment just to discuss it. So first, let's start with the real question. What actually is dystonia? It's a movement disorder that causes muscles to contract in uncontrollable ways. This could involve jerking, twists of the body. It can affect one muscle, two muscles, or all muscles. It really depends on the person. So a lot like most diseases, dystonia does have triggers, but they're not necessarily triggers for everyone. Some people develop dystonia. God, that's a mouthful. Some people develop dystonia because of these, whereas others might develop it just as a part of life. So some of the main triggers for dystonia are birth injuries, infections, reactions to certain drugs, trauma, or even strokes. These can all be reasons for dystonia, but as I said, there are countless other reasons that may affect each person differently. Unfortunately, dystonia doesn't have a cure yet, but there are things you can do that can help. Some of the things that I do are I have medication that I take, mostly for when I'm sleeping because I tend to twitch a lot. The way I describe it to people is, you know when you're about to fall asleep and then you suddenly jerk awake? It might only happen once or twice to you, but you probably know what I'm on about. That used to happen to me every single night and I couldn't get a good night's sleep. And then I was given some medication by my doctor. I've been able to sleep properly since then. Dystonia could be a symptom of Parkinson's, but it isn't necessarily Parkinson's. So if you're diagnosed with dystonia, that doesn't mean that you're going to end up having Parkinson's, but it is a possibility. The main thing to understand is dystonia doesn't shorten life expectancy. It's not a disease that's going to kill you, it's just a disease that's going to make your life a little bit more difficult. So ever since I was a little girl, I always had really shaky hands and a shaky body, and my voice would shake quite a lot as well. I was always told it was anxiety or something like that, which never really made sense to me. How could a 6-year-old have such bad anxiety when I didn't even feel anxious most of the time? I didn't even really know what anxiety was. As I got older and older, it started affecting me more. People were pointing it out. I was struggling in school because I didn't know how to hold a pen without scribbling all over the pages. And overall, it just pushed me to a breaking point where I thought to myself, I cannot do this anymore. Now, we've been going to see doctors since I was about 3 years old, and every single time it would either be anxiety, it would be something going on in the brain, they'd do an MRI, they'd find nothing. It was just a repetitive, almost endless cycle, and I really thought I was never going to get a proper diagnosis. Then a doctor suggested it might have been essential tremors. After some research, I thought, yeah, that fits, and started labelling it as essential tremors. But there were parts of it that didn't make sense. For instance, essential tremors shouldn't be making you jerk your movements all the time. Then last year, for whatever reason, my condition started to get a lot worse. I couldn't do simple things because my hands were shaking so much. I couldn't talk in full sentences because I was stumbling over my words. My voice was shaking, so people always thought I was nervous. Overall, I just hated it. So I rang the doctors crying, saying, I want a proper diagnosis, I need medication, I can't sleep, I can barely eat because my hands are shaking that much. Obviously COVID hit, making it really, really difficult to see a doctor in person, so I settled for an appointment over the phone. Luckily my brother was home when this appointment was going on, so he could help out with all of the little tests, but I got speaking to a doctor and I explained everything. I explained the fact that I was a waitress, and although my work are really, really supportive, it's humiliating when I go over to customers and have to put plates down, but it's rattling against it. I explained how I was worried about attending university. Everyone was going to think I was really nervous when actually I'm quite extroverted when it comes to it. At the end of the phone call, the doctor said, I think that's dystonic tremors, and my brother and I turned to each other and went, huh? This diagnosis meant I could look more into that and see if that fit me a bit more, which I did, and all of the symptoms seemed to fit perfectly. Now, I wouldn't be giving you a proper look into my dystonia if it didn't actually show you what it looks like. Just for context, I class today as a good day. I haven't been too bad today with regards to my shakes, but this is what it looks like. I don't really notice them. It's just other people point them out and then I go, yeah, my hands shake. So here it is. So as you can see, this one is a lot worse, which is really weird. And if I point out that it's worse, it gets worse. But it's a good day today, they're not too bad. I hope that gave you more of an insight into my life and my condition. If you have a friend with this condition, my piece of advice would be don't point it out. It makes it a lot worse when you point it out. It's almost like it's triggered by the mention of dystonia. Don't assume that they're nervous. Just treat them like a normal human being. It really isn't that difficult. And so that concludes that segment about dystonia. If you want to read more about it, I'll put some links in the description. Okay, we'll go back to the documentary now. It's the end of the documentary, and to conclude, I did an interview with both of my brothers. This is a really nice way to just clear it off on a high and just have a general nice conversation with the two people who impacted my life the most. Now, not to sound like I'm at the Oscars, but there are a couple of people that I want to thank. First, and arguably the most important person, was my mum. The amount of times I wanted to just stop doing it, figure out something else to do for this project was endless, and she really got me through it and kept motivating me to carry on. So thanks, Mum. Obviously, I want to thank both of my brothers. Agreeing to do the interview with me, although it did take some organising, it was really worth it, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. They also really helped me do this documentary. When I was coming up with ideas, they were the ones who helped me figure out what exactly I was trying to achieve with this. My college friends and my college tutors, who I would see them working, and it made me want to work twice as hard. So, the end of the documentary. I really, really hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it, and maybe I'll make another one soon, who knows. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate you all so much. Right, so, let's begin. So, Theo, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Okay, hello. I'm Theo. I'm Orla's eldest brother. I'm currently doing a Master's in Chemical Engineering at the University of Sheffield and working next year building submarines.
Awesome. Declan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Declan. I'm 19. I'm a first-year marketing management student at Brighton.
But Declan, you have a really interesting thing going on the side of your uni degree. Do you want to talk about that, your little enterprise?
Yeah, cool. So I've just launched Paperclip Social, which is an enterprise that connects students with small and medium businesses for project work to allow people to get more experience in their fields before they finish their degree.
What kind of inspired you to make that?
Interesting question. I've been working in community social management for a long time, probably the last couple of years, and we built a community around sort of mental health and well-being, and realised that actually all of these under 25s and all of these students have some incredible talents they can use with one another. Why don't we make the most out of that? Then speaking to some of my course mates, a lot of people, especially people who are looking at getting placements and graduating, really struggling to find work, and even if they are trying to find work that may not be grad jobs as such, everywhere's asking for experience. So let's bring the experience to the students rather than trying to get them to go out to find this experience. We could have a program that lets them do that ourselves. So we've now got a pool of under 25s who have incredible talents in so many different places. And now we've got an opportunity to connect them to these small and medium businesses who may be able to put them up for these opportunities.
Sounds really, really cool. I'll put that in the description under the documentary. I'll put the link to the website so that anyone watching can just check it out.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Theo, you kind of spoke a little bit about your career earlier when you talked about making submarines, that kind of thing. Is there more you can tell us about not only your career, but what you kind of want to do in the future as well?
Okay, so I'm going into an operations engineering role, which is pretty much the refining of manufacturing processes, naturally with building these submarines. And the hope is to go along with that, see where it leads to, hopefully get a charter ship. World's my oyster, frankly.
What kind of made you want to go down that route? Like, so when you were studying in uni, a lot of people have this idea of, I don't really know where I'm going to go from here. So what was it that made you want to progress to that kind of area of expertise?
So I applied on a whim and happened to get through all the stages, and they offered me a job, and it was a very nice job. So really it was very much a case of luck more than anything that resulted in me getting this job.
That's kind of a common theme in our family, isn't it? Is all of us just end up, just something falls into place. Similar to what happened to you with university, Declan. It just sort of started to fall into place, didn't it?
It's funny, my entire career so far has been very much being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Working in a state agency for the first couple of years of my career, which, again, right place, right time. I went and asked for some advice and got given a job. And yeah, sort of falling into university on a whim because I decided that I wanted to be somewhere else, and I was lucky enough to find the right place, Brighton, be able to get there at the right time with just enough time to sort out my accommodation and land myself in the best position I've ever been in my life.
And it's similar. I mean, I was speaking about this earlier in my documentary about me applying to university, and the one place that I got into was the one place I really didn't think I'd get into, and I applied there to fill a space. So yeah, it really is. All of us just happen to have quite a bit of luck in that area. Cheesy question, but they ask it in school all the time, that kind of thing. In 5 or 10 years, whichever you want to pick, where would you ideally see yourself, and what would you be doing? Theo, do you want to answer first?
5 years older.
You're so annoying. Oh my God.
Yeah, so 5 years' time, I'd like to be on the road to buy my first property. Not sure where in the country I'd like to be. Would sort of like to be looking at settling down, because in 5 years' time, I'll be coming up to my 30th birthday. So, yeah, there you go, guys. So, yeah, that's another thing I'd like to consider in 5 years' time.
This is a bit of a random question, but I always like to ask, is there a specific place you want to visit? Just in the future?
Mongolia.
Oh.
So Mongolia is a really interesting place. So I really like the history of the Mongol Empire, and to sort of go there and experience, because the land there hasn't really changed much. It's still quite rural, quite nomadic. So that would be my one. I'd like to go there, but it would probably require considerable effort to get there.
Nice. I wasn't expecting that answer, but that's quite interesting. Declan, same for you. 5-10 years. Where do you see yourself? Please don't copy Theo's joke.
No, it's fine. I won't do what Theo did. I'll start with 10 years. In 10 years' time, I'm going to be 10 years older.
So annoying. Oh my God.
My goal in life is freedom. I want to be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want to do it. So I want to be able to build myself enough tools and facilities and enterprises that will give me those freedoms. If I want to finish work at 3 o'clock and go over to Spain for the evening, I want to be able to do that. And so freedom is definitely my driver. I want to be able to travel. And for a specific place I want to visit, I would probably say Mongolia.
You're going to go with Theo.
And Theo would have a great time there, and I like taking Theo to places where he'd have a great time.
You make him sound like he's a child. You want to take
He is a
him
child.
away.
Have you met him?
I would have a cracking time in Mongolia. Definitely be very bored. Go to a lot of museums.
Oh, we like museums. We do like museums. I would probably want to go to Southeast Asia and properly experience all the different cultures. I know that's such a basic answer because Southeast Asia has the most stark difference in cultures to where we are at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I want the freedom to go there and then go somewhere else and then go somewhere else. And then if I decide to go back, then I will. And if I don't, then I won't. And that's my freedom. That's my goal.
So this question I actually didn't send to you guys when I sent the list of questions so that you guys could have.
You didn't send a list of questions. These are totally unfair questions.
What? I didn't get this list.
People watching this documentary, I'd assume, are going to be... Who are you waving at?
The people watching the documentary.
Right. Declan, don't wave again. So the people watching the documentary are all going to be of similar ages.
I'm waving.
Please.
Like that.
The demographic of people watching this documentary is going to be people who are similar ages to me, I'd assume. From my research, they're going to be 16 to 19-year-olds. Your experiences at uni are very, very different. Obviously, Theo, you've been there for much longer. Declan is at Brighton. So it's...
It's a slander.
You're like those two children in school that just can't sit together, and the teacher always has to separate them. I genuinely understand how teachers feel now. Right, deep breaths. Theo,
before we continue, Theo, what are you eating? Do you often eat in your team's interviews?
Harry Star Mix. Kids and grown-ups love it so.
Theo, you've been at uni for 5 years. Declan, you're in your first year of university. Is there anything you've experienced that has made you more aware of something you perhaps didn't know before?
I think university gives you a lot of independence. I think you learn a lot more about how to manage yourself, manage your time. And that's the main thing. Is like, you're you're thrown in the deep end, as it were. So I think that's the main thing that I've learned, like, obviously outside of my studies from university.
I think the biggest thing is different types of people that I would have never experienced back home. I've had an opportunity to blend and mix with people that basically don't exist back where we're from. And I've really opened my eyes to different types of cultures and the way that different people think, and develop a real understanding of that sort of thing, which has been really exciting for me.
Do you think these experiences have kind of changed you view the world, if that makes sense?
Massively so. Definitely.
The phrase, when people go to university, they usually come home and they say, "Oh, this." Stop raising your hand. Right. When people go to university, they usually come home and they say, "Oh, this place seems so much smaller than I remember." Do you think that's going to affect where you decide to live in the future, maybe?
So before university, I really don't think I would have done well in a big city, which is why I picked Sheffield, because it's a bit more small city. But then what I mean is last year when I was working in London, I felt a lot more comfortable in London, whereas I don't think I could have done as well if I went from a village to then living in the capital. So yeah, I think I wouldn't have been able to do that without that step of going through university.
Yeah.
When I was living in the village, I anticipated that I'd be local for the rest of my life for a big period of time. My career was there, my career was in the village. Everything that I was going to do was centred around that. Moving to Brighton gave me the opportunity to understand that the world is so much bigger than where I was. And it's definitely pushed me more in the direction of actually never staying in one place for too long and really getting out there and really getting to experience everything that I want to.
Do you think that going to university is a really vital step in growing as a person?
No. I think too many people go to university for the sake of going to university, because yes, it does give you that opportunity to leave behind the village you were in and get some fresh experience, but that essentially a lot of people get out of that, they get an extra 3 or 4 years of essentially it being infantilised or not having a real job, as it were, and being able to have a lot more of a social life for those 3 years than if they were to go down the apprenticeship route. So I think university is very, very good for getting you out of the city, getting new experiences. But the same could be said for giving someone into an apprenticeship and getting them to move out of their house. Because I think that's the main thing, is not necessarily moving across the country, because a lot of people do stay in local towns where they see their parents the weekend. But moving out of a house is the real key thing that should be pushed for, rather than getting people to go to university.
Mm. And Declan, you didn't go to university right after school. You had a year where you were just working in your estate agency. Do you think that benefited you before you went to uni?
Definitely, yeah. I wouldn't change my career path, as it were, really. I got the opportunity to understand what it was like to work. I got the opportunity to understand what it was like to have money. But I'm sort of contrary to Theo. I sort of believe that if you have the facilities to go to university, I think you should. Do something that's valuable and that will engage you and that will push you in the right direction without a shadow of doubt. But the amount that I've learned within the last year is way above and beyond what I've learned in the years prior. And I think it's hugely important to get out there and experience the diversity of people that you can understand and really sort of vibe with, as it were. Think about what you really want to achieve. Is it that you want to have money? Then maybe go down the apprenticeship route. Is it that you want to have an amazing social life for a little bit? Then go to university. A lot of things that definitely comes down to a case-by-case basis, and all you can trust is your gut instinct.
I think that's a really, really good analysis on it, and that'll give people watching who are kind of in the midst of deciding when they want to go to uni. Both those answers will really help them out. So, COVID affected all of us massively, but uni students, were affected hugely by it, I think. Obviously, Dad died just before lockdown.
What?
Oh, God. Why weren't we told?
How has lockdown affected you, and do you think Dad dying made it easier or harder to cope with lockdown?
Probably should give cause that Dad died after a brain tumour. So had he survived into the pandemic, it would have been very different, because he would have been on the extremely vulnerable. I probably wouldn't have been able to come home, which might mean I wasn't even home the day he died. So slight benefit was that I was home at the time. So last year wasn't a university student. I was working as part of a sandwich year. So I was able to move from London to back home and work from home, which was, I think it was quite good that we were all able to stay together for quite a while. I think under normal circumstances, I would have only been able to be back for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. That's how lockdowns affected me. I think this year at university has had a massive detrimental impact on my studies, because it's quite hard to motivate yourself, haven't really got the library facilities to go in and work there, where especially the main thing there is not having a place to work, but it's having able to see your peers and have communication and then improve each other's work through that conversation.
Declan, do you think that made it easier and harder? And how do you think lockdown affected you being in your first year of uni?
So obviously Dad died quite a considerable amount of time before I decided to go to university. So we obviously had a really good opportunity to spend good time with each other. I sort of had a really good opportunity to actually spend time with the family that I hadn't really spent before, because I was working sort of, sometimes 100 and 120 hours a week last year, completely shut off and changed the pace of life. And I think that in some ways it did make it a bit easier to deal with, because the change in pace of life with another change allowed it to be easier to sink in. I think we had a lot of fun over the first lockdown, and I think we can all agree on that one. And it definitely did push me in a different direction, because actually having Dad dying and then having a lockdown and having a lot of horrible experiences during that lockdown as well meant that I was able to clear up my view on the world and sort of get my head a bit more screwed on and decide what I believe in and what I value. It's done me a lot of good in a lot of ways. A lot of people complain about 2020 because it has hurt so many people and caused so much grief and loss. There's some benefits that we've had as well from being in this position where we can actually really reflect on ourselves and reflect on the things we value and want to prioritise. I came to uni with the anticipation that we were going to have some sort of influence by COVID. It was in July that I applied for university before going down there in August. I was aware that there was going to be some restrictions, but didn't know that restrictions would be as heavy as they are. Online school has been really, really difficult for pretty much everyone that's done it. People's exam results are much lower this year than they have been before. It's made university really weird, because especially being a first year, which is when you're meant to be socialising, you're meant to get out there. This is meant to be the year of your life that you really start to understand who you are as a person. And I've missed it to a large extent. I'm really privileged to be doing a lot of online activities throughout anyway, developing the social community, developing my own businesses, and this is one of, I think it's probably the 6th business idea that I've started to tickle off this year. So it's been really exciting. Having the opportunity to do that as well alongside has been a benefit in some ways. I'm really looking forward to going to the pub on Monday.
Yeah, going inside as well. Been talking about restrictions easing and that kind of thing, but no one for sure knows what's going to be happening come September. Would you guys have any advice for people who are going to uni in September who are kind of worried about that whole isolation feeling?
I would go for it. If it's a toss-up between going and not going, I would go anyway, because at least you'll be stuck with people who are in exactly the same position. Whereas if you go, I'll take a year out, then essentially you're having to try and find a job in a market that, if there are restrictions at that point, the university becomes untenable, then you're not going to be able to find a job anyway. Just getting through it is just stay in contact with people. I mean, it's easy. It's set up these calls. There are loads of online games now that you can play with people. Among Us obviously being the main one that's come to the forefront in the last year or so.
I've been through uni with COVID. I've probably had it worse because we're meant to be socialising and not been able to. I've still had the best year of my life, even if it has been in my uni bedroom.
So simple as that. You just tell people to go for it.
Just go. Seriously, just go.
Do you have a life motto or maybe a quote that you've read in a book or something that you live by? What is it and what does it mean to you?
I've just seen what book Declan's picked up by a certain Dale Carnegie. I'll let him get onto that when he gets there. I would say my quote of the moon is from Marcus Aurelius' Meditation. So Marcus Aurelius, famous Stoic philosopher and also Roman emperor. One of the passages in the book is about when you wake up in the morning, realise what a privilege it is to be alive. So were you made to just spend that extra hour in bed wrapped up, or were you made to be a man who sees the day? And you are going to meet people who are dishonest or scheming or envious, jealous, etc. Those people are going to be there. Those people are going to let you down. But you need to get up, get on with it. That's your purpose. That's what you have to do.
That has made me. I've just opened up Amazon so I can order that book. That sounds great.
One of his most famous is Memento Mori, which means you must die, which is a really important thing to bear in mind. That one day you will die. And if you were to die tomorrow, how would you live today? So, and if you were told you were going to die in 3 days' time, would that make much difference to if you were told you're going to die tomorrow? And so on and so forth. So why not live in the moment now?
I really like that.
That kind of reminds me of that thing Mum always says to us, which is, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's what that reminds me of.
As a business student, I will forever rave about Dale Carnegie. I will teach his praise to everyone that I ever meet, and I will wind people up with it. There is an excerpt from How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is like the sales handbook, but it runs further beyond understanding how people think, but actually understanding how you respond to people. Wouldn't you like to have a magic phrase that would stop arguments, eliminate ill feelings, create goodwill, and make the other person listen attentively? Yeah? All right, here it is. I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you. An answer like that will often soften the most cantankerous old cuss alive. And you can say that and be 100% sincere. Because if you were the other person, you, of course, would feel just as he does.
All of our little, whatever you want to call them, mottos, quotes, they all fall under that similar line. At the root, the same kind of thing.
So although we are very different people, I think we often believe in the same things.
I think we were also really, really lucky in the sense that Mum and Dad really brought us up with a sense of you can have your own opinion. They really showed us the line between a debate and an argument and how to talk about your own opinion without getting annoyed. And I think as we get older as well, that's really, really going to help us with the way we view life as well. Okay, well, that's that done then. Thank you for doing that with me. Yeah, Declan, as I said, that paperclip enterprise thing, I'll put that in the description box below. So I'm aware that ended really suddenly, but my mum walked in and it scared me. And then the boys got onto the topic of Declan's birthday and everything just, disaster struck after I cropped it. So I thought, what better than to end it there? Everything that I've said will be linked in the description, will definitely be linked. And thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. That's the end.